Now, let's get back to how mainstream Australian voters saw through the dumbest election campaign in history. Labor said it could change the climate of the planet, and it said it could do it without hurting your cost of living, and that this incredible policy prescription didn't even need to be costed. It also expected you to vote for $400 billion of extra taxes, take a risk on border protection, and boost spending when the budget is barely under control. You were smarter than that. But they're still melting down. First up, I'm no longer on Twitter, but thanks to the wonderful Rita Panahi, who brought me this. She brought this tweet to my attention. It's a tweet from a bloke called Peter Murphy back on April the 13th, just at the start of the election campaign, and he shared an article where I was explaining how the coalition could win the election. He said it was idiotic, factless, Liberal propaganda that he looked forward to retweeting after the election. Well, thanks, Spud. We've done it for you. Good call, that one. And what about this from former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd? It couldn't be Labor's policies, could it? It couldn't be that voters are smarter than Kevin, could it? Apparently, the election result was all about some evil News Corp conspiracy. Maybe Kevin Rudd had a big night at a strip club. And also on Twitter, here is just one of hundreds we could have shown where the left are sneering at their fellow citizens. ABC presenter Jonathan Green reckons Australians are small-minded. Jono, maybe the small-mindedness is closer to home. In a similar vein, there's Channel 10's Lisa Wilkinson, who wrote an open letter to the Prime Minister and says she and other lefties are feeling a little broken and that they hate the toxic nature of Australian politics. She wants more civil discourse. This would be just after she and her husband supported the whole anti-Abbott campaign in their local electorate, barracking for GetUp and others who were putting up offensive posters and disgusting ads, and saw even some physical violence as the anti-Abbott crowd preferenced Fraser Anning's party ahead of Tony Abbott. Yes, Lisa, a more civil discourse would be terrific. But she's not the only broken-hearted millionaire. Mike Cannon-Brookes is more in your billionaire class, but he landed back in Sydney, presumably on one of those renewable electricity planes, to share his sadness about the election result and urge people to hug their loved ones. He kept tweeting as he took a cab home rather than the more climate-efficient train, and returned to his $100 million mansion, which has a carbon footprint to match its price. Its proximity to the waterfront also suggests that Cannon-Brookes isn't too worried about rising sea levels either. And OK, we've seen enough of this nonsense. I want to share with you now some sense, some clarity, and the obvious path forward on climate policy. Let me replay a small part of my interview yesterday with James Stephens. He's the new Liberal member for Sturt in South Australia, yet to take his place in the federal parliament.
Yes, I do support our policy position on meeting the Paris targets. I think that we should do our fair share as a country, but no more than that. And we certainly shouldn't penalise Australian businesses and Australian families by having a disproportionate approach to reducing carbon emissions that just exports our jobs to other countries that aren't putting the same unnecessarily overly ambitious targets in place. All it means is that particularly businesses, particularly in the manufacturing sector, the jobs that are lost in our economy if we take unnecessary policy positions that increase power prices to an uncompetitive way, those jobs are going to go to countries that are emitting an enormous amount more carbon than we are here in Australia at the moment. So I don't understand why even the environmentalists think that we should put ourselves in that position, because you've got the perverse situation where we're penalising our economy, but we're also penalising the planet. If you consider the increase in greenhouse gas emissions to be something that puts the planet at peril, that's going to be achieved by sending jobs from this country to other countries that are not doing anywhere near what we already are.
This is so sensible, so achievable and so obvious. Meet the Paris targets, do our bit and look after our economy. The obvious solution is for Labor to agree with that, as they once did. And at least one person in the ALP was speaking sense on these issues this morning.
I want the party back to the political centre. I want a commitment to rural and regional Australia in particular. Now, I want a leader, if I don't run, who's prepared to say, yes, I'm committed to meaningful climate change action, but I'm as equally committed to the mining industry. I'm as equally committed to getting gas out of the ground to fuel our jobs in the manufacturing sector. And I'm committed to giving regional Australia a big seat at the decision-making table. Because if we don't have someone from the bush at that table, we will continue to make the same mistakes.
This is one of the main lessons from the election. Voters want sensible, achievable climate action, not reckless virtue signalling. Even in the prestigious Wall Street Journal, this has been recognised with their influential editorial, noting that if Labor had won, the world media would have been talking about a new era of climate action, but that because they lost, the media would go quiet on this climate change drubbing. The lesson is there. It's about the sensible centre.